The wind howled across the icy plains of Glaciora, carrying sharp shards of snow that cut like tiny knives. The sun barely pierced the thick clouds above, leaving the frozen world in a dim, pale light. Snow drifts rose like small mountains, and deep cracks in the ice crisscrossed the land like veins. In the middle of this frozen wilderness, a small figure struggled against the storm. Lyra, a young Valari mother, clutched her son, Kiro, tightly. The Valari were a humanoid species, with pale blue skin that shimmered faintly in sunlight, and eyes that glowed softly in the dark. Their bodies were naturally strong, but the ice storms of Glaciora were merciless even for them. Lyra's heart pounded as the icy wind whipped her long silver hair around her face. "Kiro, stay close," she shouted, her voice almost lost in the roaring wind. Kiro, only 6 cycles old, giggled despite the cold. He loved the snow. To him, the storm was a giant playground, and the flakes were sparkling friends dancing in the air. But Lyra knew better. She had survived many storms, and she knew how quickly they could turn deadly. "Just a little farther, Kiro. Don't go near that crack," she warned, pointing to a jagged line in the ice. But Kiro was curious. His tiny boots slipped on the slick surface as he crawled toward the crack, fascinated by the dark gap. Suddenly, a sharp gust of wind knocked him off balance. Lyra lunged, but she was a step too late. Kiro tumbled toward the edge, his small arms flailing. Panic surged through her. "Kiro!" she screamed, rushing forward. The snow stung her face and her legs slipped on the frozen ground, but nothing could stop her. She dove, reaching out with all her strength. At that moment, a flash of movement caught her eye. A figure appeared out of the storm, moving with impossible speed through the snow. It was a human. Captain Ethan Reed had been observing Glaciora for several days. His mission was scientific: study the ice storms, record weather patterns, and learn about the Valari. Humans had visited Glaciora before, but most stayed in the cities near the equator-like regions. Ethan, however, was drawn to the wilderness. He loved challenges, and the stormy plains of Glaciora were the perfect test of human ingenuity. He spotted Cairo slipping and reacted without hesitation. Humans were not naturally adapted to Glaciora's cold, but Ethan's gear was advanced. He moved across the ice as if it were solid ground, a protective suit shielding him from the worst of the wind and frost. With a quick leap, he grabbed Kiro just before he disappeared into the crack. The boy squealed, partly from fright and partly from surprise, as Ethan lifted him safely into his arms. Lyra reached them moments later, her arms trembling. Her blue eyes glimmered with fear and anger. She had heard stories of humans, strange, creatures that walked among the stars, strong but unpredictable. And now one had saved her child. Who are you?" she stammered, keeping a cautious distance. The storm whipped around them, and the wind made words almost impossible to hear. "I'm human," Ethan said, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "I saw your son in danger. I wanted to help." His voice was steady, but his breath came in short puffs, frozen in the frigid air. Lyra hesitated. She had been taught that humans were unpredictable. Some could be kind, yes, but others could be dangerous. And yet, this human had risked himself for her child. Her mind raced. "Thank you," she said softly, almost to herself. Kiro clung to Ethan, looking wide-eyed at the stranger. Lyra felt a strange warmth in her chest. She had never seen this kind of compassion before, not from any Valari and certainly not from any human she had heard about. Ethan glanced around. The storm was worsening. Snow whipped across the ground, making it difficult to see more than a few meters ahead. Ice sheets were breaking under the weight of the wind, forming dangerous crevasses. They needed shelter and fast. "We need to move," he said. "It's not safe here." Lyra nodded. "There's a cave nearby. Follow me," she said, gesturing toward a jagged ice formation half buried in snow. She led the way, careful to avoid cracks and weak ice. Ethan followed, carrying Kiro in his arms. Despite his strength, the cold was gnawing at him. Every movement required effort, but he did not complain. His focus was only on keeping the boy safe. As they walked, Lyra observed Ethan. He was different from the Velari in many ways. His skin was pale and vulnerable in this cold, yet he moved with confidence. His eyes were steady, filled with determination, and somehow, despite the strange language barrier and differences between their species, she felt a connection, a recognition of courage and care. "Where are you from?" she asked finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was low, almost lost to the wind. Ethan smiled faintly. "Earth? You might call it a small blue planet far from here." Lyra tilted her head. "Earth?" she repeated, testing the word on her tongue. She had heard humans came from many worlds, but she had never met one herself. Ethan nodded. "Yes, I study planets. I like to help when I can." Cairo, still in Ethan's arms, giggled again, pointing at the human's helmet. "Helmet? Funny." Ethan laughed softly. "It's to keep me warm and alive," he said, a playful tone in his voice. Even in the storm, a small warmth of humor passed between them. Finally, they reached the cave. It was shallow, but offered protection from the worst of the storm. Lyra helped Ethan guide Cairo inside first. The walls were icy, but at least the wind could not reach them here. Lyra crouched beside her son, running her hands through his silver hair. "You're safe now," she whispered. For the first time since the storm began, a sense of relief washed over her. Ethan sat nearby, checking his equipment. "The storm will last for hours," he said. "We should stay inside until it passes." Lyra watched him. She wanted to speak, to ask questions, but she did not know the words. Instead, she simply observed the human who had saved her child. She realized something profound. Courage and compassion were universal. They did not belong to one species or another. As the storm raged outside, the small group huddled together. Cairo played quietly, fascinated by Ethan's equipment, while Lyra stayed close, still wary but slowly learning to trust. She had faced many dangers in her life, but this act of human bravery, was something she could not forget. Hours passed. The wind howled, but inside the cave the warmth of care and protection grew. Lyra began to understand that humans were capable of something her people rarely saw: selfless action, risking one's own life to save another. When the storm finally eased, the sun broke through the icy clouds. Its pale light reflected off the snow, casting a sparkling glow over the frozen plains. Lyra stepped outside cautiously, with Cairo in her arms and Ethan beside her. The world was still harsh, still dangerous, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. She had never known such compassion before, and she realized it could exist, even in the most unlikely places. Ethan looked around the icy plains. His mission had been scientific, but this was something else entirely. He had saved a life, and in doing so had built a bridge between two very different worlds. Lyra watched him silently, understanding that this human had shown her something her people rarely experienced. And deep inside, she made a quiet promise. One day her people would know the truth, that courage, kindness, and compassion could exist beyond their own kind. For now, though, she simply held Cairo close and nodded to Ethan. Words were not enough. The act of saving her child, of facing danger without hesitation, spoke louder than anything else could. The wind had slowed, the storm was fading, and the frozen world of Glaciora seemed a little less cold. For Lyra, for Cairo, and for Ethan, a new story had begun, one of trust, bravery, and the quiet power of compassion. And somewhere deep in her heart, Lyra knew that this human, Captain Ethan Reed, had changed her life forever. The icy winds of Glaciora had calmed slightly, but the world was still harsh and unforgiving. Snow drifted across the plains in gentle waves, but hidden dangers lingered beneath the frozen surface. Lyra, holding Cairo tightly, took cautious steps outside the cave. Her heart still raced from the storm, and every crack in the ice made her tense. Ethan followed, his protective suit making it easier for him to move over the ice. Cairo clung to his mother, but his small eyes kept glancing at the human who had saved him. There was curiosity in his gaze, tinged with awe. "We need to reach the village," Lyra said, her voice calm but firm. The Valari village was not far, but the storm had left the paths treacherous. Ice sheets had shifted, some broken into deep fissures. Travelers without care could easily fall into one. Ethan nodded. "I can help," he said simply. His voice carried confidence, and though his words were few, his actions spoke louder. Lyra hesitated. Her people had always relied on themselves, trusting only Valari guidance. Humans were strange, unpredictable. And yet, here was a human who had risked his life without hesitation to save her child. She could not deny it. "Follow me," she said finally. "I will lead. You stay close." They stepped carefully over the uneven ice, moving slowly. The wind had eased, but the cold still bit through layers of clothing. Kiro's small boots slipped occasionally, and Lyra held him close. To prevent a fall, Ethan observed quietly. He had studied many planets, but Glaciora was unlike anything he had seen. The ice was beautiful, almost magical, yet deadly. Every step required attention. He kept one hand near Kiro, ready to intervene if the child stumbled. As they moved, Lyra noticed Ethan examining the ice carefully. His eyes scanned for weak spots, cracks, and hidden dangers. She was impressed. Humans might not be adapted to the cold like Valari, but they had ingenuity, an ability to see solutions where her people only saw risk. "Kiro, stay close," Lyra whispered. She kept glancing at the boy, whose fascination with the snow was endless. The storm had taught him nothing. He was playful even in danger. Suddenly, Kiro pointed ahead. "Snow sparkle, look!" Lyra followed his gaze. A patch of ice glittered under the pale sunlight, but she noticed something alarming. The ice beneath that glittering layer was thin. One wrong step could break through, plunging them into freezing water. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He understood the danger immediately. "Don't go there," he warned, pointing at the ice, "when it's not safe." Lyra nodded and guided Kiro around the patch, but her heart thumped. She realized that without Ethan's knowledge, they might have walked straight into danger. The human's quick thinking had already saved her child once, and now it saved them from another threat. As they continued, the terrain became even more challenging. Snowdrifts blocked paths, and deep cracks in the ice cut across the plains like canyons. Lyra had to choose her steps carefully, and every decision carried risk. She began to see the value in Ethan's presence, not as a Valari guide, but as a partner. "Do you know this land?" she asked, curiosity overcoming caution. Ethan shook his head. "Not fully," he admitted, "but I've studied maps and ice formations. I can help find safe routes." Lyra considered this. Humans were strange indeed. They could not survive in these conditions without protection, yet this human moved with a skill that seemed almost natural. She could not explain it, but she felt a growing respect. Hours passed, and the sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows across the frozen plains. Their journey was slow, but steady. Kiro, tired but fascinated, held his mother's hand and occasionally glanced at Ethan. He was learning without words that humans could be protectors, not threats. Suddenly, the ground beneath them shook slightly. A low rumble echoed across the ice, startling them. "What now?" Lyra whispered, eyes scanning the horizon. Ethan crouched, examining the ice carefully. "A fissure. The storm may have shifted the ground underneath. We need to move carefully." Lyra felt a chill run through her. Ice fissures could be deadly, even if they looked small. One misstep, and someone could fall hundreds of feet. She tightened her grip on Kiro and moved slowly, following Ethan's careful steps. "Watch your footing," Ethan said. "Use small steps. Test the ice first." Lyra did as he suggested. She tapped each step with her foot, feeling for soft spots. Ethan did the same, moving confidently ahead of her. Kiro clung to her, trusting her guidance, but also glancing at the human with curiosity. After a tense few minutes, they reached the edge of the fissure. It was wider than it appeared, a dark chasm cutting through the ice. Lyra froze. How would they cross? Ethan looked at it thoughtfully. We can jump part of it, he said, or I can find a safer path around. Lyra's mind raced. She wanted to protect her son, but she also trusted Ethan. The human had already saved Kiro once. Perhaps he could find a way again. Find a path, she said finally. I will follow. Ethan nodded and began moving along the edge of the fissure, carefully testing the ice. Lyra followed with Cairo, relying on both her instincts and the human's guidance. It was slow work, but necessary. Every step was a choice, every movement a risk. As they progressed, a sudden gust of wind blew across the fissure, carrying loose snow and making it difficult to see. Kiro shrank closer to Lyra, shivering. Hold him tight, Ethan said. The wind is strong here. Lyra hugged her son close, feeling the warmth of his small body against hers. She glanced at Ethan. The human seemed unaffected, his focus entirely on keeping them safe. She realized that humans were capable of enduring challenges far beyond their natural limits when it mattered. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached a safer area. The fissure was behind them and the path ahead was clearer. Lyra exhaled in relief. Kiro giggled, pointing at the human. Ethan, he said. Ethan smiled. Yes, Kiro? He asked gently. His voice carried calm and reassurance, qualities Lyra had not expected from humans. You funny, Kiro said, laughing. Lyra smiled despite herself. The storm, the cold, and the fear seemed to melt away in that simple moment of joy. They continued toward the Valari village. The journey was still long and the sun was dipping toward the horizon, but Lyra felt something new, a sense of hope. She had never known a human could show such care and courage. This one had risked his own life for her child, and he continued to guide them safely. As night fell, the temperature dropped further. Stars sparkled above like distant fireflies, and the world was quiet except for the faint howling of the wind. Lyra led them to a small cluster of rocks that offered minimal shelter. It was not much, but it was enough to rest for a short time. Stay close, she said, setting Kiro down gently. He was tired, but his eyes were still bright with curiosity. Ethan crouched beside them. We should rest. The village is not far, but traveling in darkness is risky. Lyra nodded. She studied the human closely. There was something extraordinary about him. Despite the dangers, he remained calm, focused, and compassionate. She realized that this was not a typical human trait. It was something special, something heroic. Kiro crawled into Ethan's lap, fascinated by his suit and equipment. Ethan gently lifted the child and showed him the lights and controls on his wrist device. Kiro's laughter echoed across the icy plain, a small sound of warmth in the cold night. Lyra watched silently, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had never seen compassion like this before. Humans were capable of bravery, yes, but this went beyond courage. This was kindness, care, and selflessness combined. The night passed slowly, but uneventfully. The stars above shone brightly, and the cold was less terrifying with Ethan beside them. Lyra felt a connection forming, one that transcended language and species. She could not yet trust completely, but she knew that humans were more than stories and rumors. They were capable of greatness. When the first light of dawn appeared, painting the ice in shades of gold and pink, Lyra stood and helped Kiro to his feet. The village was visible in the distance now, a small cluster of lights and structures against the frozen landscape. Almost there, Lyra whispered. She looked at Ethan. Thank you for everything. Ethan nodded. No need to thank me. I only did what anyone would do. Lyra shook her head. No human has ever done this for us before. You are different. Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe we are more alike than you think, he said. Together, they began the final stretch toward the Valari village, Cairo skipping slightly ahead, his excitement returning. The journey had been dangerous, but it had also been remarkable. Lyra, realized that sometimes survival was not just about strength, it was about trust, courage, and the willingness to care for others, even at great risk. And in that moment, she understood something important. Humans were capable of extraordinary compassion, and one brave human had just changed her life forever. The morning light painted the icy plains of Glaciora in pale shades of pink and gold. Snow sparkled like scattered diamonds, but the beauty of the world could not hide the danger lurking beneath. Lyra, Kiro, and Ethan continued their journey toward the Valari village. The first part of their trek had been slow, cautious, and tense, but now a new challenge awaited them, one that would test both their courage and their trust. Kiro skipped ahead, laughing and chasing tiny snowflakes. Lyra's eyes softened as she watched him, but her instincts kept her alert. The plains of Glaciora were beautiful, yes, but unpredictable. One wrong step could send them tumbling into hidden fissures or fragile ice sheets. Ethan, walking just behind Lyra, scanned the surroundings carefully. His human eyes noticed subtle changes in the ice, tiny cracks, frost patterns that indicated weak spots, and shadows that could hide dangerous drops. Even in protective gear, humans were vulnerable. On this planet, yet Ethan moved with precision, every step deliberate, every action calculated. "Kiro, stay close," Lyra warned. Her voice carried authority, but there was also a trace of relief. The boy had survived the first storm, and she was determined to keep him safe. But Kiro was curious. He pointed at a sparkling patch of ice. "Look, magic snow." Lyra frowned. That magic snow was actually a thin sheet covering a deep fissure. One misstep could plunge them into freezing darkness. She took Kiro's hand firmly. "Not there, Kiro," she said. Ethan observed silently. Then he stepped forward, kneeling on the ice. With a careful tap of his boot, he tested the surface. "It's weak," he said. "We need to go around." Lyra felt a strange admiration. Humans were not naturally adapted to cold, yet this one could read the ice as if he had been born on Glaciora. She began to understand that courage was not just physical strength, it was knowledge, awareness, and quick thinking. The path around the fissure was narrow. Snow drifts rose like walls, and the ice beneath was slick. Lyra led the way, Kiro close at her side, while Ethan followed, keeping an eye on every step. The silence between them was filled only by the crunch of snow underfoot and the distant howl of the wind. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept across the plain. Snow whipped their faces, stinging like tiny needles. Kiro shrank closer to Lyra, shivering. "Hold him tight," Ethan said calmly. "The wind is strong here." Lyra hugged her son close, feeling the warmth of his small body against hers. She glanced at Ethan. Even in the harsh cold, his focus remained unwavering. He moved with confidence, as if the ice itself obeyed him. She realized that humans were capable of endurance far beyond what she had imagined. The storm's remnants still lingered, swirling in unpredictable currents. Lyra had to concentrate intensely to choose safe steps. She realized that survival here was not just about physical skill, it was about trusting others too. She had always relied only on Valari guidance, but now this human was guiding them safely. She began to feel a quiet trust forming, even if she could not yet put it into words. After several tense minutes, they approached a shallow crevasse. Its edges were jagged, the drop hidden beneath loose snow. Lyra froze. How would they cross it? Ethan examined the crevasse carefully. "We can cross, but we must be cautious," he said. He looked at Lyra. "I'll go first, then help you, and—" "Kiro," Lyra hesitated. She had been trained to protect her child at all costs. Letting a human lead the way felt strange, almost unnatural. Yet she could not ignore the evidence. He had already saved Kiro once, and his calm precision inspired confidence. "Go. Ahead," she said, finally stepping back slightly. "We will follow." Ethan nodded and moved forward carefully. He tested each step, finding solid footing, and then extended his hand toward Lyra and Kiro. "Follow my lead," he said. Lyra grasped his hand first, feeling the strength in his grip. Kiro held on tightly to her other hand. Step by step they crossed the crevasse. Every movement was tense, every step a small victory. When they reached the other side safely, relief washed over them. Kiro giggled, bouncing slightly. "You did it," he exclaimed, looking at Ethan with wide eyes. Ethan smiled faintly. "We did it together," he said. Lyra's heart warmed. She realized that trust was not given lightly, but it could grow through action. This human had shown her that courage could be combined with care. That strength was meaningful only when it protected others. As they continued, the terrain became steeper. Ice ridges rose like frozen waves, and the snow-covered plains stretched endlessly. Lyra led the way, but she relied on Ethan's judgment more and more. He pointed out safe footholds, identified hidden cracks, and even carried Kiro over particularly tricky patches. "You are very brave," Lyra said quietly as they rested for a moment, catching their breath. Ethan shook his head. "Bravery is easy when you want to help someone," he said. "It's the fear of losing them that gives you courage." Lyra thought about his words. They were simple, yet they carried profound truth. She had always believed that bravery was about strength or skill, but now she understood. It was about heart, about caring deeply enough to face danger willingly. The sun began to lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the ice. The village was visible now, a cluster of faint lights and structures against the frozen landscape. Yet the journey was not over. The plains were still treacherous, and the storm had left the land fragile. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. A low rumble echoed across the ice. Lyra froze, her heart pounding. "What now?" she whispered. Ethan crouched, examining the snow. "A shift in the ice. We need to move quickly but carefully. Follow my steps." The tremor continued, and small cracks began to form in the ice around them. Kiro clung to Lyra, frightened by the sound. Lyra held him close, whispering calming words. She glanced at Ethan. His calm demeanor steadied her. Step by step they moved forward. Ethan tested each patch of ice before crossing. Lyra followed, trusting his judgment. Kiro, though scared, trusted his mother and the human who had saved him. After several tense minutes, they reached a safer area. The tremors subsided and the ice was solid once more. Lyra exhaled in relief. Kiro smiled, pointing at Ethan. "You funny," he said, breaking the tension with laughter. Ethan chuckled softly. "Maybe, but right now we need to keep going." They pressed on toward the village. The journey was slow, but their confidence grew. Lyra felt a bond forming, not just between her and Ethan, but including Kiro as well. She realized that trust could be built even in the harshest conditions, and that humans, despite being different, could show extraordinary care. As night fell, the temperature dropped further. Snow dusted the ground, and the stars above sparkled like distant jewels. The wind had quieted, but it still carried a sharp bite. Lyra found a small hollow between ice ridges and led the group inside. It was not much, but it offered shelter from the cold. "Stay close," she said, setting Kiro down gently. Ethan crouched nearby. "We should rest," he said. "Traveling in darkness is dangerous." Lyra nodded. She watched him quietly. Humans were remarkable. They were not naturally adapted to this world, yet this one had guided them safely, showing courage, intelligence, and care. She felt gratitude but also admiration. Kiro, tired but curious, crawled into Ethan's lap. Ethan lifted the child gently, showing him the lights and buttons on his suit. Kiro's laughter echoed softly, a bright sound in the frozen night. Lyra smiled. She had never seen such kindness before, and it touched her deeply. She realized that humans could inspire trust and hope, even in the most dangerous places. The night passed, cold but safe. Stars glittered above and the world seemed quieter, calmer. Lyra reflected on the day's journey. She had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, yet she had learned something valuable. Courage and compassion could Crossworlds, species, and differences. When dawn appeared, casting soft light across the ice, the village was closer. Lyra helped Kiro to his feet. He skipped ahead slightly, excited to reach home. Almost there, Lyra said softly. She glanced at Ethan. Thank you. For everything. Ethan shook his head. I only did what anyone would do. Lyra's eyes softened. No human has ever done this for us. You are different. Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe we are more alike than you think. Together, they continued toward the village. Kiro leading the way, Lyra felt hope growing within her. She had never seen a human act with such bravery and compassion, and she knew that this journey had changed her forever. The frozen plains of Glaciora were still dangerous, but for the first time, Lyra felt that, with courage, trust, and compassion, even the harshest world could be survived. The morning sun barely warmed the frozen plains of Glaciora, and yet the world seemed less harsh than before. Lyra, Cairo, and Ethan had survived the storm and the trembling ice, but the journey was far from over. Ahead of them stretched a treacherous crevasse, wider than any they had encountered. Its edges were jagged and icy, the drop hidden beneath a thin layer of snow. The frozen wind whistled through the gap, carrying a sound that made the skin tingle and the heart race. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She had crossed small fissures in weak ice, but this crevasse was different. It was dangerous, unpredictable, and unforgiving. She glanced at Kiro, who held tightly to her hand, his small face pale with apprehension. Even his excitement had faded in the shadow of this massive ice chasm. Ethan stepped forward, crouching to examine the edge. His human eyes scanned the ice carefully, noting every weak spot, every potential foothold. It's wide, he said calmly, but we can cross. We need to use care and teamwork. Lyra's instincts screamed caution. She had been trained to protect her child at all costs, and letting a human lead across such a dangerous chasm felt unnatural, and yet, she could not ignore the evidence. Ethan had already saved Kiro once and guided them safely through treacherous ice. Perhaps he could do it again. Show me how, she said, her voice steady despite her fear. Ethan nodded. I'll go first and test the path. Follow carefully. He moved forward, placing each foot deliberately, testing the ice with a tool that extended from his suit. He reached the middle of the crevasse with careful precision, then extended his hand toward. Lyra, follow my lead, he said. His calm voice carried reassurance. Lyra took a deep breath. She crouched, lifting Kiro so that he could be held safely against her chest. We will do this together, she whispered. Step by step, they crossed the crevasse. The ice groaned under their weight, and Lyra's heart raced with every step. Kiro held tightly to her, shivering, but trusting her completely. Ethan guided them patiently, ensuring each movement was safe. Halfway across, a sharp crack echoed through the air. Lyra froze, her heart stopping for a moment. The ice beneath them quivered. Kiro whimpered softly. Stay calm, Ethan said firmly. We're fine. Move slowly and carefully. Lyra nodded, her hands tightening around her son. She realized that fear was natural, but courage came from pushing forward despite it. She had never felt such a mixture of fear and trust before. The human beside her inspired her. He did not just act bravely, he acted wisely and compassionately. Finally, they reached the other side. Relief washed over them like sunlight through a storm. Kiro giggled, bouncing slightly. We did it, he exclaimed. Ethan smiled faintly. Yes? Together. Lyra felt her chest swell with gratitude. She had never known such courage combined, with care. The human had not only saved her child, but had also helped her learn something profound. Bravery was not just facing danger, it was protecting others in the face of it. The plains stretched ahead, still cold and covered in ice, but their confidence grew. They pressed on toward the Valari village, the sun climbing higher in the sky. Lyra noticed that the landscape, while dangerous, had a beauty she had not appreciated before. The ice glimmered like crystal, the snow sparkled, and the distant mountains rose majestically. Yet she knew that beauty was deceptive. The frozen world could be deadly at any moment. As they walked, Ethan kept a careful eye on the terrain. He pointed out thin sheets of ice, weak ridges, and areas where snow might conceal dangerous drops. Lyra followed his guidance closely, trusting his judgment more than her own instincts for the first time. "Why do you help us?" Lyra asked quietly during a brief rest. She had been holding the question inside since the day Ethan saved Cairo. Ethan looked at her, his eyes calm and thoughtful. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said simply. "I couldn't leave a child in danger, and I believe that helping others is the best part of being human." Lyra considered his words. Simple, yet profound. Humans were capable of such selfless acts, and this one had risked his life for a child who was not his own. She realized that compassion could be a form of bravery, as powerful as strength or skill. Cairo, curious as ever, reached out to touch the glowing buttons on Ethan's suit. Ethan smiled and lifted him gently, showing him how the devices worked. Kiro's laughter echoed across the plains, a small but warm sound against the cold wind. Lyra felt a sense of peace she had never known. Despite the dangers, they were safe, and trust was growing between them, but the frozen world was not yet done testing them. As they neared a steep ridge, the wind grew stronger. Snow swirled around them, reducing visibility. Lyra tightened her grip on Cairo, and Ethan adjusted his stance to shield the child. "We must move quickly," Ethan said. "The ridge is narrow, and the wind is strong. One wrong step could be dangerous." Lyra nodded, swallowing her fear. She had faced storms and ice before, but never like this. She realized that courage was not just about facing danger alone. It was about trusting others to face it with you. Step by step, they moved along the ridge. The snow whipped their faces, stinging and cold. Kiro held tightly to Lyra, his small body trembling, but his eyes were bright with trust. Ethan stayed close, guiding them and offering quiet reassurance. Halfway along the ridge, a sudden crack of ice echoed beneath their feet. The ridge trembled slightly. Lyra froze, her heart leaping into her throat. Kiro whimpered softly. "Move, slowly," Ethan said, his voice calm but firm. "We can do this." Lyra focused on each step, trusting Ethan's guidance. She realized that bravery was contagious. Seeing the human remain calm and focused helped her calm her own fear. Step by step, they crossed the ridge, finally reaching solid ground. They paused, breathing heavily but safe. Kiro laughed, relieved and excited. Lyra smiled, hugging him tightly. She looked at Ethan with gratitude and admiration. This human had not only saved her child, but had also taught her something important. Courage was meaningful only when it protected others, and trust could turn fear into strength. As the sun climbed higher, they continued toward the village. The path was still icy, but their confidence had grown. Lyra noticed that Kiro was more curious than ever, pointing at strange snow formations and small ice crystals. Ethan explained them patiently, showing a gentle and nurturing side that touched Lyra deeply. By midday, the village was in sight. Small lights shimmered through the icy haze, and the structures rose like small castles from the snow. Lyra felt a surge of relief. They had faced storms, ice fissures, and treacherous ridges, yet they were still together, safe and moving forward. Cairo ran ahead, his excitement returning. "Home!" he shouted, pointing at the village. Lyra followed, smiling, while Ethan walked beside her. She realized that humans were capable of extraordinary acts, not just because of strength, but because of heart. Compassion, courage, and cleverness were the tools that had guided them through danger. Finally, they reached the edge of the village. Valari guards approached, their expressions wary. Humans were rare visitors, and most Valari were cautious around them. But Lyra stepped forward, holding Kiro close and gesturing to Ethan. "This human saved my child," she said clearly. "He is brave. He helped us." The guards looked at Ethan carefully, then nodded. Respect and curiosity filled their eyes. Lyra knew that this moment was significant. Humans had often been misunderstood by her people, seen as strangers or threats. But this one had proven that courage and compassion could cross worlds. Ethan smiled politely at the Valari, then knelt to hand Kiro safely to his mother. The child hugged her tightly, and Lyra felt a warmth in her heart that the icy plains of Glaciora could never chill. "You are remarkable," Lyra said softly to Ethan. He shook his head, smiling faintly. "I just did what anyone should do," he said. "No," Lyra replied firmly. "You are different. Brave, kind, and compassionate. You saved more than my child. You saved our trust in the unknown." Kiro laughed, hugging both of them together. The sun reflected off the snow, casting a warm glow on their faces. For a moment, the cold world of Glaciora seemed less dangerous and the frozen plains felt welcoming. Ethan watched the village, the child, and Lyra. He realized that this journey had taught him something too. That bravery was meaningful only when combined with compassion, and that even in the most distant worlds, humans could make a difference. Lyra looked at Ethan with gratitude and newfound understanding. The human had changed her life, her child's life, and perhaps even the perception of humans among her people. The village gates opened, and the Valari villagers welcomed them cautiously but warmly. Lyra knew that the story of this human would be told for cycles to come, a tale of bravery, trust, and compassion in the frozen world of Glaciora. For now, though, she simply held Cairo close and looked at Ethan. Words were not enough. Actions had spoken louder than any language, and the act of saving a child had built a bridge between two very different worlds. The sun continued to shine, reflecting off the icy plains, and Lyra knew that a new chapter had begun, not just for her family, but for the bond between humans and Valari. The Valari village rose from the icy plains like a small cluster of glimmering crystals. The snow reflected the pale sunlight, casting long shadows across the frozen ground. Lyra, holding Kiro tightly, stepped carefully toward the gates, with Ethan following closely behind. Their journey had been long, dangerous, and exhausting, but the hardest challenges were yet to come. Even as the village came into view, the frozen world reminded them of its power. The ice beneath their feet groaned, and gusts of wind whipped across the plains. Lyra tightened her grip on Kiro, aware that danger was never far from Glaciora's frozen surface. Ethan's eyes scanned the surroundings. His human instincts noticed subtle shifts in the snow, faint cracks in the ice, and potential hazards hidden beneath thin layers. "We are close," he said calmly, "but stay alert." Cairo, sensing the approaching safety, held on to his mother's arm but peeked curiously at the human who had saved him twice already. Ethan smiled faintly. "Almost there, little one," he said gently. As they approached the final stretch, the ground trembled beneath them. A sharp crack echoed across the plains. Lyra froze. She had hoped their challenges were behind them, but Glaciora had one last test. The crevasse they had crossed yesterday had widened overnight. A small section of the ice ridge ahead had broken free, creating a dangerous gap between them and the village gates. Snow fell into the dark abyss below with a soft, chilling sound. Lyra's heart pounded. "We have to cross it," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. Kiro clung to her tightly, shivering. Ethan studied the broken ridge carefully. "We can do it," he said, "but we need to work together, step by step." Lyra nodded, realizing that she had no choice but to trust him completely. She had already seen his courage, intelligence, and compassion in action. Now, that trust would be tested to its limit. Ethan stepped forward first, testing each foothold with careful precision. The ice was thin, and one misstep could plunge them into the freezing abyss. He extended a hand back to Lyra. "Follow me slowly," he said. Lyra crouched, holding Kiro securely against her chest. "We will follow together," she whispered. Her heart pounded, but she felt a strange calm in Ethan's presence. His focus, courage, and determination inspired her to push forward. Step by step, They moved across the broken ridge. The ice groaned beneath their weight, sending shivers up their spines. Kiro whimpered softly, and Lyra held him tighter. "It's okay, little one," she murmured. "We are safe with him." Ethan's calm guidance was steadying. He pointed, out solid footing, tested each step, and ensured their path was as safe as possible. "Almost there," he said. "One more step." Then a loud crack split the air. A section of ice beneath them began to break. Lyra froze, her heart leaping. Kiro gasped in fear. "Hold on," Ethan shouted. Without hesitation, he scooped Kiro, in one arm keeping him secure, and reached out to Lyra with the other. His strength and skill allowed him to steady both of them. "Trust me," he said firmly. Lyra nodded, gripping his hand tightly. With a careful push and a leap of faith, they landed on solid ice on the other side. Relief washed over them like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Kiro laughed, jumping slightly despite his fear. "We made it!" he exclaimed. Lyra's chest swelled with gratitude and admiration. She hugged her son tightly, then turned to Ethan. "Thank you," she said, her voice full of emotion. You saved us again." Ethan shook his head. "I only did what anyone would do," he said quietly. But Lyra could see the truth in his eyes. Courage, compassion, and selflessness were not just words. They were actions, and he had proven them over and over. The gates of the Villari village opened, and the villagers came forward cautiously. Humans were rare visitors, and most Villari were wary of strangers. But when Lyra stepped forward holding Kiro and gesturing toward Ethan, a hush fell over the crowd. "This human saved my child," Lyra said clearly. "He is brave. He helped us." The villagers' eyes widened. Whispers spread through the crowd. A human, once considered distant and strange, had proven that he could act with courage and compassion beyond expectation. Respect filled their faces. Ethan knelt, placing Kiro gently into Lyra's arms. The boy hugged his mother tightly, laughing and pointing at the human who had become his hero. Lyra smiled, feeling warmth she had never known in the cold world of Glaciora. "You are remarkable," she said softly to Ethan. He shook his head, smiling faintly. "I just did what was right," he said. "No," Lyra replied firmly. "You are different. Brave, kind, and compassionate. You saved more than my child. You saved our trust in the unknown." Kiro laughed, hugging both of them together. The sunlight reflected off the snow, casting a warm glow across the frozen village. For a moment, the harshness of Glaciora seemed to fade, replaced by a sense of hope and connection. The village elders approached, their expressions respectful and curious. Lyra explained briefly what had happened: the storm, the broken ice, and the human who had guided them through danger. The elders listened carefully, nodding in appreciation. "You have shown us something important," one elder said, his voice calm but serious. "Not all humans are strangers or threats. Some carry courage and kindness even across the stars." Ethan bowed slightly, acknowledging their respect. "I am honored," he said. "I only wished to help." Lyra hugged Kiro again, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The journey had been perilous, but it had also been transformative. She had learned that trust could be built through action, that courage and compassion could cross species, and that humans were capable of extraordinary selflessness. Kiro's small voice broke the momentary silence. "Ethan, friend?" Ethan smiled warmly. "Yes, Kiro, friend," he said. The boy's eyes lit up and he giggled. Lyra felt a swell of hope for the next generation, the child who had learned that bravery and kindness could come from unexpected places. The villagers began to gather around, offering warmth, food, and shelter. Lyra realized that their story would be told for many cycles to come, a tale of courage, trust, and compassion in a frozen world. Humans had often been misunderstood, but now her people had witnessed firsthand the extraordinary power of one individual's bravery. Ethan looked at the village, at Lyra, and at Kiro. He realized that this journey had taught him something too, that bravery and compassion were inseparable, that even in the most distant worlds, humans could make a difference, and that small actions could change the perception of entire species. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the snow, Lyra and Ethan stood together watching the village. She felt a quiet joy and pride in her heart. For the first time, she understood that courage was not just physical, it was moral, emotional, and selfless. Kiro ran ahead to greet the other children, laughing and playing, his fear of the storm already fading. Lyra followed, smiling, while Ethan walked beside her. She realized that humans were capable of acts that inspired trust, hope, and admiration, qualities that could unite worlds. By midday, the village was alive with activity. The Valari shared food, warmth, and stories of bravery. Lyra knew that the tale of Ethan's courage would be remembered for generations. Humans, once distant and misunderstood, now held a place of respect in their hearts. Lyra turned to Ethan, her eyes reflecting gratitude and understanding. "You have changed my life," she said softly. "Not just for saving Kiro, but for showing me what compassion can truly be." Ethan smiled faintly. "We all have the power to make a difference," he said. "I only hope my actions inspire others as much as you inspire me." For a moment, the frozen world of Glaciora seemed less cold. The harsh winds were quiet, the ice glimmered peacefully, and the snow reflected the sunlight like a promise of new beginnings. Lyra knew that life on this planet would continue to be difficult, but hope had been restored. She hugged Kiro tightly, watching him play with the other children. She glanced at Ethan, realizing that this human had given them more than safety. He had given them trust, hope, and a new understanding of bravery. The frozen world of Glaciora, once dangerous and unyielding, now seemed full of potential. With courage, compassion, and trust, even the harshest environment could be faced. And Lyra knew that humans, like Ethan, were capable of extraordinary acts that could change lives across worlds. As the sun reached its peak, Lyra whispered softly to herself, a promise to the generations to come. "We will remember this day, and we will honor the bravery and kindness of this human." And deep in her heart, she knew that the bond forged in the icy plains of Glaciora would last for cycles, an enduring story of courage, compassion, and hope.